we're going to go straight into a presentation. I don't know if you're aware of the format, so it's kind of a workshop, but it's mainly a presentation. And we've got 3 sort of main sections and then questions at kind of half an hour intervals throughout. So yeah, I'll just get started. So I'm hoping that everybody is. I can't even tell if everyone's okay and can see this, but I'm going to assume that you are.
India, this is really bad, but I've got to go and get my power cable.
Go and get your power cable. That's a really good idea. So I'll get going whilst he's going to do that. So welcome to our talk. It means an awful lot to be here. It was back in 2016 where I came across Vandana Shiva's book, Earth Democracy, whilst I was working on a food system project in Hyderabad. Prior to that, I sort of spent my whole working life trying to understand why best in practice and the kind of the best business doesn't always make it and finds it extra hard to get there. And it wasn't until this book that I started to learn that you needed to sort of look at the system as a whole, and that progress itself was interpretable and the problem was incredibly complicated. So I went from there and decided that because of this, I should just go home and learn about my own surroundings and get practice before sort of thinking I knew something about somewhere else, I suppose. And since then, I've came across some great guides and writers, Daniel Christian Wall, Gable Matter, the Schumacher College, Jenny Anderson, Naomi Klein, Helen Norberg Hodge, and these people have guided me through my journey. And so it's pretty outstanding that I'm here, and thank you very much. And I hope that we do it justice and that you find our insights helpful and our experience valuable for the projects that you might be doing elsewhere in the world. So a bit of background. I am one of the co-founders of Scoop. I have my own journey into Scoop, but we all have our own journey in. I'm a researcher, but of food systems. I'm a trained chef, and I've always stayed quite close to art to help interpret. As a chef, it's very helpful. In Scoop, I primarily work on the decision making and the business development side, but I will jump in the kitchen and help whenever's needed. If I sound a bit confused, I'm also admitting people at the same time. So that's a bit about me. I'm just about to start a PhD to try and broaden my understanding of these challenges of transitioning to a local food system. And that starts in September. And just to hand over to Kasper to introduce himself.
Yeah, hello everyone. Nice to be with you all today. My name is Kasper Wimberley, and my background is really from working as a practicing artist and curator of art projects, and also in educational settings. And I'm likewise one of the co-founders of the Sustainable Cooperative, and I guess I'm sort of responsible for the operational side of the organisation. Back to you.
So across this quite lengthy, and thank you for sticking with us at the end if you do, presentation, the initial part is just going to introduce Scoop. There was a bit of a ostentatious title saying how to start a cooperative that works. We're hoping it works ongoing, but so we'll introduce where it is now. And then Kasper will take over and talk about the sort of journey into understanding the community, and sort of placemaking, to use a kind of a common term in that. Then I'm going to talk about how I understood the systemic and structural barriers and the opportunities to success. And this was looking at trying to kind of get into the real sort of systems understanding of this. And I'll go through that. And then at the last one is we'll share talking about the economics of the business. We both come with different experience and have brought in different concepts that guide us through our decision making. So Scoop was set up in 2018. It's a consumer cooperative. It has nearly 350 fee-paying members. It sells over 700 unpackaged products, all agroecological, organic. The terminologies are plentiful, and we spend a lot of time investigating and researching and being questioned by the community to get the right products in the shop. We have a reuse centre for packaging and a production kitchen, an education and cultural programme, and we've just about got into chicken farming. So that's going to be an interesting development over the next year. It set out initially to create a sustainable food supply in Jersey. When you look at Jersey, it's got a great agricultural history, and how we define sustainable has been a really interesting journey for us. We're doing it in the shadows of this conventional food system, which is very strong in the island, although it's also precarious. And we've done it by leveraging values within the community and designing systems that maximize our positive impact. We currently have about 7 employees at living wage. That's something developed in the UK, which is above minimum wage, based on how much we think it actually costs to live here, although it's in itself is quite contentious. We're incubating 2 new businesses, and we have a turnover of about 720,000 projected by the end of the year. So I'm not going to go into the detail of this slide, but essentially this shows what we've achieved or kind of experienced over the last, over our first 2 years, and then the next one over our last one. And this slide is to kind of highlight all the different areas that we have been working at. As a cooperative, we brought in a lot of skills, and so we can spot opportunities that help us develop in terms of where we get funding or who we partner with. So this is kind of just to show you the momentum. And then obviously COVID happened, so our momentum changed, and it really kind of settled in lots of different decision making and firefighting. But I'm not sure if other people in different local communities around the world experience quite a jump up economically. So Kasper's now, so that's the kind of where we're at. It's quite brief, but just to show you that we've got quite a lot going on in the shop, and from there quite a lot of opportunity. But this next section, or the next 3 sections, are what we think are the key components that have made it successful. There are many people and many different journeys into Scoop. That's what makes it very fascinating when you talk to others. But this is Kasper's interpretation and then mine. So I'll hand it over to Kasper, and I'll try and keep up with the slides.
Thank you, India. Just quickly, for those of you who may not know where Jersey is or what Jersey is, Jersey is a small island, has a population of about 100,000 people, and is 9 miles by 5 miles, and it's very close to the French coast. Although it is it's autonomous from the United Kingdom, but connected also to Great Britain as well as what's called a crown dependency. So we have our own government and up to a degree our own decision-making capabilities. So that's just for those of you who may have never heard where we are today. Before I just go into, I was going to say a little bit my journey into Scoop or into the Sustainable Cooperative, which we refer to often as Scoop. But I just wanted to ask all of you a little question first before I talk about sort of 2 years prior to the Sustainable Cooperative and what I was doing then and how that led into what we're doing now. I just wanted to ask all of you if there is something or someone that you would like to find out more about in your locality, in the area that you live. So just think of someone or something that you would like to find out more about. And we'll maybe come back to that later if we get a chance. So I grew up in Jersey. I have fond memories of that, but I couldn't wait to leave when I was 18. So I left the island and studied performance design and then worked as a tutor at universities and then moved to Germany, initially working as a scenographer and theatre director before moving into public art projects with my partner, Susanna. And we sort of specialised in public art projects that were really rooted in the context and communities within which we worked and lived. And I guess our main interest was analysing power structures and hierarchies within these contexts and trying to create a dialogue around them or subvert them in some way. And maybe even sometimes galvanise marginalised communities in some way and individuals to look at their situation and maybe change things. So that was kind of my background. And then at some point I forgot why I left. I think India, you can go on to the next slide if you want. So I came back with my own small family, young family. And when I came back to Jersey, we were considering what we would like to do on the island. And one of the things about maybe because it's an island or maybe because it's a wealthy island or maybe for other reasons, but there does sometimes seem to be a problem with or a lack of debate around critical issues that are really important to people's lives, where maybe people have alternative ideas, alternative voices, and maybe because everyone knows each other, or just anything that sort of challenged the status quo wasn't always welcome, and you might be sort of told to pipe down or keep quiet about it. So we wanted to create an art program that could deal with these critical issues and create a space for these voices to be heard and investigated further, which is why we set up something called the Morning Boat, because I guess also in Jersey, even though it's a small island, the impacts of what happens in Jersey are felt far beyond our shores in some ways, in the sense that one of the main economic activities here is the financial services industries, which certainly operates on a global level. So I think we can, I don't know, India, if you can go to the next one whenever you want, really. So we set up the Morning Boat, and it was essentially an artist residency where we would invite artists from around the world who came to Jersey with their own experiences, own perspectives, and maybe with some fresh eyes from the outside. And then they would work with local experts and with local residents and explore issues that they uncovered and found mutually interesting. And we decided to start by looking at agriculture as a kind of focus, even though agriculture obviously is interwoven with other sectors of the economy, but Jersey had quite often, or in the last sort of 20, 30 years, it had quite often sort of compartmentalized industry and into sort of sectors, and quite often it would be described as agriculture, finance and tourism as the three kind of pillars of the Jersey economic system. Obviously it's not really like that, but we decided to look at agriculture, I guess partly because it was the area that it was probably the first industry in Jersey, the first economic activity, and it will likely be the one that continues as long as people live here. So we thought we'd look at that, and then we started inviting artists to do things, and they would come and meet farmers and fishermen and chefs and so on and so forth. So just check where I am. Essentially, what we were trying to do, I guess, is bring people together and give people an opportunity to understand one another better, as a foundations for having ideas for the future, and that are inclusive to the various people who live in the community and their interests and needs. So I was going to sort of start by trying to give you a feel of what we were doing. There's a short video from one of the projects before I talk to, skip that one, I think. India, let's wait a minute, let me just have a look. That's fine. So I don't know if the volume can be heard, India.
Hopefully will make people think about things in a different way. And I'm free from the chain gang. I wanted people to think about home. That we were all connected and we think we did one another. Language, names, and seen as Hebrew. A lot more to it. My mother's incredible amount of knowledge, constant work ethic. But she knew it's a way of life. I just think they have a different relationship to the place because they have access to a different layer of culture and a different set of stories. All the years I was but it has changed.
Could you put the sound on mute from the film, because I think it's not working very well anyway, and I can just talk over it.
In that way. Free from, I'm not sure.
I think so.
What I'm always trying to achieve when I'm doing that is I'm just trying to get people together. I'm trying to get people in the same room, not me. They sort of appreciate each other in a different way. Merci, Ben Defay, Deal for Gallon. Thank you.
Sorry about the sound there. What I'll do is when India's next talking, I'll post a little link to the film so you can have a better listen to that.
Sorry about that.
But essentially, it was an artist called Rowan O'Neill from Wales who came to work here, and is it going? Yeah. You could go to the next slide if you want, India. Oh, there we go. We are already. Yeah. And this was a performance that was the culmination of her period of research in Jersey, and just the coming together of so many different people, or so many different parts of the community was in itself a rare and powerful moment. And she was dealing with quite emotive subjects in terms of essentially the collapse of the small farming infrastructure on the island, which, you know, in the past sort of 50 to 100 years, we've massively reduced from over 1,000 farms to a handful. So she was looking at that, and also looking at the decline of the language that was once the language that was spoken on the island. So she's dealing with these kind of issues and exploring sort of perceptions towards farmers and so on, and bringing different people together in the community to explore those issues further. So that was just sort of as a taster of the kind of work that we've been doing here. And now I'm going to come to two other projects which really were very specifically the catalysts for the Sustainable Cooperative, and without them that may never have happened. And just as a little aside, because I noticed someone mentioning the Morning Boat in the chat, the name Morning Boat actually comes from a term in Jersey which links to that mentality I was talking about being sort of closing off any alternative marginalized ideas and things like this. And there's a quote that says, if you don't like it, there's a boat in the morning, in terms of sort of, you know, please leave if you don't like how we're currently doing things. So for us, creating the Morning Boat was very much about subverting that phrase and creating a real organization, a real space which welcomes these voices as part of the discussion. So the slide we're now looking at, the Seed Journey in Climavore. The Seed Journey was one of the first projects we hosted in Jersey, and it's with an international artist collective called Future Farmers. And they came as part of a journey from Norway to Palestine, where they were collecting seeds, and they were exploring seed sovereignty and the commons, the notion of the commons within agriculture. And their visit also became a catalyst for all sorts of things, where we started growing heritage barley on the island to brew a homegrown beer for the first time in a long time. And they met lots of farmers, and also they met some of the people who later would become involved with the Sustainable Cooperative. So through their interactions, we came across an abandoned farm shop, for example, and met the person who was the owner of that farm shop, who told us about how he would love it to be reused again and come back to life, and that all sort of started the seeds of an idea that there might be a possibility of reinvigorating that space. So that kind of led to some of those contacts, and then the Climavore project, which was run with two artists under the name of Cooking Sections, which specifically looks at our diets and eating according to climate change or climatic changes and environmental challenges. And they came and worked with local oyster farmers and local culinary students, and also brought together a range of different environmental organizations. And that's when I really got to know India. She was one of the people who joined that debate, and we looked at the effects of farming on water, and on natural resources such as water and so on. And it in turn became also a catalyst for other things. And we then developed a program called Rewild My Plate, which was looking at agriculture and aquaculture as a whole, and eating in a way that supports biodiversity, and looking at this notion of conservation cooking, that really the choices we make when we're eating and cooking have quite a profound impact on the environment around us. So through these two projects and through bringing different people together, there was a kind of, I guess, a solidarity, a group which shared certain values, and that then became the beginnings of the idea that maybe something like the Sustainable Cooperative in Jersey could flourish. So that was, I just wanted to sort of show that. I'm going to check where I am now, 1 second. I think we can go to the next one, India. I was going to say maybe all this seems like a tangent, but hopefully that's already demonstrated a little bit that, why or how this art program led eventually to something which is now something a little bit different than that. So then I guess when these ideas started forming, it was still very much on a personal level. That what was currently available for me as a consumer wasn't really matching what I would like to be able to find in Jersey in terms of how I would like to source my food. I'm not a grower, and even if we're now getting chickens, but we're not. I don't see myself as a producer and such. So the first step, I think, was just I was wanting to know, with a few other people, such as India, are we alone with this, or is there actually a broad support for creating an alternative offering? So we started by doing research, basically just trying to find out how many people would be interested, and it became very quickly apparent that there was quite a significant interest in this, and we weren't the only ones feeling that way. So then we started to sort of create a community of like-minded individuals, even though everyone had differences in terms of what their specific interests or journeys into that interest were. But it was it was enough that we thought, okay, let's start to formalize these ideas a little bit. And we created a steering committee, which took them further, and then started hosting public meetings where people could come and explore ideas further, interrogate things, any proposals that were put on the table, and try and refine the ideas as much as we could. And I guess all of that, from a sort of strategic perspective, was about creating a critical mass. It was about making sure that when we came to the point of actually starting to create the physical shop and the space and the things that and starting to get resources together, that we knew there was the support out there to give it stability over a longer period of time. So that's really when we decided to start a crowdfunding campaign and get things going, and we'll go into a little bit later sort of the nuts and bolts of that and how we sort of calculated the critical mass to make sure that we were going to be in the right place when we got there. So I think you can go to the next one, India. I'm whizzing through a little bit.
Hey, India.
Hello.
Sorry.
That's all right. So there's a little question here. I can read this one out. I just going back to how the morning boat's been operating, and I guess it's really it's been an opportunity for me as someone who's grown up here and been surrounded by fields and this environment, but not really understood it in much detail. And this program and all the projects that have happened have really helped me better understand it. Of course, there's always new things to explore. So I think it's just good to ask that question always about how much time do we devote to better understanding our communities, and doing so with humility, that we're open to our own opinions and perspectives to change as we do so. And really find out about other people within our community and their deep interests, their skills and journeys, which will hopefully help us understand why culturally things are the way they are. So it comes back to what I was, at the beginning, asking that question about thinking about something you'd like to find out more about. I'm pretty sure if you went and did that, if you went and found out more about that one person or about that one issue that you're really interested in, that good things will come off of that. And, on some level, it will be worthwhile. So then I've just written, what we don't yet know is always more inspiring than what we already know. And I think in my practice as an artist as well, it's always the unexpected, the surprising things that you discover about people or a place that generally will lead to things happening and more ideas coming together and bouncing off that. So always be generous as well in terms of sharing knowledge, power and skills and resources. I think that's the other thing that for us, the Sustainable Cooperative has been pretty critical, that we're very much based on people who are prepared to be very sharing in the way that they approach any sort of process or collaboration or relationship. And then also just, what I've gone over with the work of the Morning Boat, that the arts, or in the way that I understand them, can really act as a catalyst for the kind of social movements that we're now going to go on to detail, and also help negotiate cultural shifts and sort of an evolution of society, hopefully towards more emancipatory constructions or forms, and just finally, I just sort of, for me, when later we talk about economic and systemic or structural challenges, for me they all are cultural manifestations. They all are informed by culture. So what we're always doing is obviously evolving that culture, and hopefully in a way that is positive. So do you want to go to the next one? Completely lost track of all those notes that I had there. I don't think we've got some questions yet, but if you have, that would be lovely. We were initially going to have sort of breakout rooms, but it didn't, unfortunately, wasn't possible technically with what we've got as a package here. So what I wanted to also ask is just that amongst yourselves, and maybe it's now more just sort of a question to go over, is to try and think of a specific idea or vision. For some of you, it might already have started. You might have started the journey of realizing that, but something that you think will improve the place that you live, and then think about what you need to try and address that, and who will benefit from it. Oh, sorry, think what need it is trying to address this vision or idea, and who will benefit from it, and then what you think that the first or next step is to making it actually happen. So I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of things from all of you and that you've done that were very inspiring, and I hopefully I can find out more of that later. And feel free to post in the chat anything that you are doing, so that me and India can go back and find out more about the people who are listening to us. So does anyone have any questions at all about the side of things that I've been introducing in terms of?
There are a few in the chat if you have a look through. I can't see the chat.
Okay, I've got it on the side here, but yeah, if anyone has a question, just post it and I will introduce you, or you can say yourself. Okay, otherwise we'll continue. Hello,
Hello, I have a question. This is Maura Stevens.
Sure.
I'm going to put on my video here, so I'm not a. I wonder for the constituents or your fellow residents who were resistant to your ideas, do you continue trying to bring them in, or do you sort of give up and just go on without them? It's a dilemma for many of us.
Yeah,
trying to be fully inclusive, but being held back by resistance.
it's a good question. Yeah.
Could I give that answer a go?
Yeah, go.
So one of the initial kind of put downs of this agroecological movement, this grassroots movement, was does it make money? Is the value, is the financial value? And those people, I was like, let's see in a couple of years. So trying to prove it economically and not worry about them. And I kind of had this idea that money, people who make money, you know, that doesn't need to be worried about, but that's how they understand it. So I keep a dialogue with people, with the naysayers, that this sector is viable, and set quite an open set an open position over how it's doing economically. So that side was quite important. And it's always quite fun as it kind of proves people and invites new people in on that tract. It's quite a crude tract, but it's a genuine one. And one of the reasons why, I'll go into this kind of later on, I'm just admitting. When you kind of look and understand people, you understand why they don't believe in it. And so you can then go back and take your experience to them if you've somehow proved them wrong. There's many different ways that you might address their needs. Is it convenience or education or whichever it may be? But I certainly take the stance that people want to survive, and they want the best environment to survive in, even though they don't think they do, and it doesn't come across as though they do. But I come at communities with a very open position and trusting position on that. And we've got an ongoing arts program which constantly goes back into different communities that have originally sort of said no. So yeah, it's their needs change, and as you get bigger, you've got to also consider how you might change to accommodate them, and if you're willing to what risks or what kind of trade-offs you're sort of willing to do that if they're not going to come to you. If that helps a bit answer your question.
Yeah, but what's in what is your own situation, if I can ask, or what's the sort of, what challenges are you facing specifically with your own project or projects?
Oh, mine are a little bit too complicated to go into right here.
Okay, no problem.
But in general, I mean, it sounds like you have a similar situation where people are so wedded to the idea that capitalism is the only system that will work, that, and you know, it feels like we have a great opportunity after COVID to make cooperation more front and center in people's minds, and it does work in some communities very well, but in others the resistance just seems stronger than ever.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've always been outwardly very positive, you know, in terms of yes, there will be some people who are obviously not going to be convinced, and they're going to maybe throw back some negativity towards what you're doing. But yeah, you do just, you know, if there's a strength in numbers of people who are really positive and on board and with you and trying to resolve issues as they come up, then I think you do have to just crack on sometimes. And sometimes when you're presented with maybe a very big obstacle because of a negative reaction, it can also galvanize that community even more, and sort of you know, then that's when we've found it's been really positive being a cooperative, because people have come to help. Like we had to move our location once quite short notice, so that was a situation for us where well, I think it really galvanized support. The period of COVID has been a challenge, obviously, and that's kind of galvanized support as well. But being positive always, you know, trying to find a solution. I think people feed off that and become as positive, you know, likewise positive about what can happen and what can be.
What another point is, there's a critical mass of cooperation and people involved.
Yeah.
Jersey's obviously a small place, but we're not that far off having enough people to get something discussed in government. On sort of like online, what question? I can't remember the term. When you support a problem or an idea. So the kind of, you create quite a political group. And another one is, so the Sustainable Cooperative itself is a constantly developing idea, and we're never one thing. We didn't open with a logo. We've constantly moved forward, and that, I think, to show the beginning, that image at the beginning with all those kind of critical moments of constantly developing. When you understand your community and all the assets and all the skills within it, it can keep moving quite quickly. So although the idea holds true and the target and the overall goal, which is the sustainable inclusive food system, it can move forward quite autonomously and welcome new people in, is what we're sort of experiencing. And then obviously some people drop away, but that's okay.
I think sometimes I've made the mistake also, like India says, it's nice when you invite someone who's questioning things or doubt to the shop itself, which is the main hub for us, even though we do other things outside the shop and have educational programs and other things like that. But the other day I was talking to a farmer that was very against the principles, and I didn't deal with it very well, you know, and he offered to meet me at the end. And instead of saying yes and let's meet, and he offered to meet me in his office in wherever it is, and I should have actually said, well, actually, do you want to come to us and sit down and have something to drink and chat about it there? Because you know, it's about that mutual understanding. They might go away and still have a very different opinion, but they will, I think, we'll both understand one another a little bit better. And my conversation with him already then was helpful in understanding, I think, his position a bit better. As someone who was, you know, conventionally farming and like India mentioned earlier, also in quite a precarious position. So trying to sort of meet them on home turf and demonstrate what you're doing is a good start, I would say.
We're going to move on now to keep to time to the next section, which is a completely different journey into Scoop. It's sort of academic, it's systems thinking, and but I think hopefully it won't be too complicated.
There was a quick question coming in.
Sorry about that.
Quick question coming in from Maura Stevens about if we have any allies running for or sitting in government offices, whether, you know, we're involved. I mean, we do. Yes, we have politicians who come to us and talk to us, and one is now trying to get us involved in a kind of forum for retail on the island, things like that. But it's been a process, I guess, of us getting to know one another, and also of us being able to demonstrate that we can make this kind of thing work, and then they tend to start taking notice. Not so much maybe at the early days. That's all.
So this is stakeholder analysis and using service design. So when I got back to Jersey, I came back from Hyderabad in India in 2017, and I saw, when I was in India, I saw a very effective small system working. It was a permaculture supply chain, consumer group, and shop and restaurant, and it all kind of fitted together. And I was consulting out there, and it sort of was incredibly inspiring. And I came back to Jersey kind of with this experience basically under my skin, I would say, and kind of opened out into my network, and didn't expect what to find. And by coincidence, a friend of a friend invited Laura Santamaria to come to Jersey to kind of help with the conversations that I wanted to be having. I hadn't met Kasper at this time, or we'd met briefly on the beach, and had sort of said hello to each other, but we certainly didn't know each other as well as we do now. So what is unique about Laura Santamaria and her work with Francesco Mazzarella is they sort of looked at the problem, or looked at the idea in a similar way that I did, in the sense that farmers can actually farm, and consumers we know what consumers should eat and could eat, and what the solutions are at both those kind of at the two ends of the spectrum, I suppose. But what was actually, for them to do it well, was constantly being marginalized. And it was this kind of the system in the middle that were causing these problems. And what these two researchers, academics and activators are specialists in is a concept called service design. And they looked at how service design can contribute to bringing really good ideas into society, and certainly groups that are marginalized. Traditionally, service design was used as a method to get an experience or product to market. So if it be like an iPhone or some really cool Puma trainers, like how would you bring it all the way through to market, and what are all the tiny little bits that get you there, and how do you research to all the sort of, from marketing to problems you might face to supply chain issues. That's the sort of process for any product to market. But instead of it being a product, it was essentially a marginalized group. And Laura came with sort of this research that Francesca had just done in South Africa, and at the Nottingham in Nottingham for the Leighton industry. And she was looking to test his theories, test his process. And we started talking, and it felt very suitable to use the method in Jersey for the project, or the understanding that I was looking for. Lara's they're still working on different projects, and I would follow them up and have a look at their work because it's incredibly inspiring. So the first thing is, what is the problem? I personally wanted to access better food. I was a chef just in Jersey, just back, and it took me forever, and I knew I was not getting the best food, and I sort of wanted it. There was lots of articles in the newspaper at the time about toxicity levels of nitrates in our water, sea lettuce, and it was very problem focused, and lots of activists and protesters throwing the problem at the feet of the government, and it felt very sort of combative. One of the early meetings or early conversations we were having with farmers, I found out that organic farming had dropped by 80% in 2014. This felt confusing because I knew it was a growing market. The farm shops couldn't withstand supermarkets coming in. They just couldn't cope with the accessibility and how Jersey sort of orientated. Supermarkets are on the edge of towns, but so are farmers, so are farm shops. So they would lose business. They felt very victimized by the conventional farming groups, and the 6 organic growers, who are all different, covering about 3% of Jersey's agricultural land, which is about 15,000 acres. They were only using 50% of their land bank. So there was obviously opportunity, and just simple things like they're too expensive and they're really bad at marketing was a sentence given to me by the guy who was writing the rural economy strategy, and that's how he spoke about the 6 farmers who were committed to growing fantastic food in the island. So I was very keen to sort of try and rethink the problem and come at it in a more systems perspective, a more grassroots perspective, and just letting people in. And it was Laura and their process that really helped me and gave me the opportunity to think like this. So I'm going to read you this really long slide, and I'm going to read it slowly because this is what became the question. So we worked together for the weekend, and this has sort of guided me, I suppose. So it's not too difficult to understand, and obviously send any questions through. We are witnessing an increased interest in organic and agroecological farming as a more healthy and sustainable approach to farming, production and consumption. Yet organic farmers often found themselves in an isolated and precarious condition, being placed at the bottom of a pyramid of a system which has proven to be unsustainable in terms of livelihood, cultural heritage, social equality and environmental stewardship. To alleviate this problem, a range of top-down policies and one-size-fits-all strategies have been deployed, but they have resulted ineffective in addressing the specific needs and aspirations of inherently diverse local communities. For this reason, the contribution that service design for social innovation can make is gaining currency and recognition, thanks to human-centered, strategic, systematic approach. This is built on the momentum of the service designer to intervene with a future-making process, tackling the complex challenges embedded in the organic ecological landscape. Service design is the activity of working out how these pieces need to fit together, as well as how they meet the user's needs and rebuilding them from the ground up as they do. So this is, the question is quite hard to pick from this, but the point of the statement is trying to get at is how complicated the problem is and how to break that down through service design in order to not do what's constantly been done in the past and really shift the position of the farmer that essentially I want to eat the food from, and so do enough people actually. So there are many, many different methodologies to do this, but I'm going to focus on the stakeholder analysis. This was really critical, and I had no budget apart from time and the fact that I was staying at my mum's house. That meant I could sort of do this myself within a few months and get a really good picture. So the first sort of statement, the first idea to get around is the fact that everybody is involved in the food system. So we know that everyone is. So everyone is a potential player in this idea of a new food system. And very specifically, everyone is coming at very different financial levels, and they have different understandings, different values, and they're all important to understand how different they all are, because everything is actually interrelated. And you can see that very easily in Jersey. If something happens, if a decision is made, then it does impact everything else, and it has these awful impacts for some, even though the intention is good. So it's very obvious how interrelated these situations are. I'm just omitting someone. The image on the right is this very, that was my desk, what it looked like for a very long period of time. One of the first things after we'd sort of agreed to get going together that Laura did was to help me understand basically all the different groups that I would need to interact with in order to do anything on the island. This is before meeting Kasper, and Scoop being an idea. And she highlighted them in these three groups: a co-manager, co-producer, co-consumer. For me, they became levels of people of how connected I felt they were to the food system. So policymakers or people in business, and how conversations were developing. I wanted to interview people that clearly wanted good to come out of something. They wanted hope, they wanted good. And actually, when you open a conversation like that, you find out most people do. You start to map these stakeholders and you think about their skills and motivations. You get a picture of what you think they might be able to be, and you think about their sort of economic impact that they have on a daily basis within the island, or their economic needs. So there's quite a lot of analysis as you go. And through this, I came up with 6 groups of stakeholders. We came up with 6 different groups, and they were policymakers, restaurateurs and food processors, wholesalers and retailers, consumers, farmers, and why can't I remember the last? It'll come up in a bit. And from those 6 groups, I selected 3 different people, or 3 different organisations I considered to be very different, either economically or impact or skill based or experience. And then I went off to ask if they were willing to have a conversation with me. The other thing that the service design introduces is this a system of asking questions. They are directional. They're designed to understand and trust that people do want something good. I asked the same 4 questions to all the people I had direct meetings with, but I also held these questions in my mind when I was in conversation with people ad hoc. This wasn't an experiment which was done on an academic level. It was simply, instead of going to the pub, maybe it was fun. So the first question is, what is your current practice? So what are people doing? There's so much assumption in the island and in small communities that you think you know what people are doing. There's half sentences everywhere, and people base decisions on half sentences. Someone mentioned about the idea of living in a small community. It's the assumption, the problem is the assumption that you know everything about everyone. You really don't. That was a big thing. So what is your current practice? What has worked and not worked? So bearing in mind this question was about accessing the best farming they can. It was about ecological farming. It was about accessing the best food in the island. It was about doing things better for the environment and for people and for the island. What's worked and what has not worked? So that's quite obvious. How do you project yourself in the future? So here's your direction. And what barriers in that shift, what are your barriers facing? And I just kind of let them talk. I didn't do that much with the information. I just gathered little bits, probably on a very biased level, because it was just me and I had little experience at this. But how this directional questioning sits with systems thinking is the fact that it's overlaid on this mapped system. So you've got this system in the island, the system of understanding all these stakeholders, and then you've got directionality through it. And it was from there that I felt that I really picked up systemic barriers and structural barriers, but more importantly, opportunities and understanding of those to see what change can be made. So I'm going to go through the next 6 slides. I'm not going to go into detail because there's a lot of information, but I'm just going to pick some interesting things that I think might be valuable to World Localization Day. I'd better go quicker. So infrastructure. There's 0 local organic biomass provider of fertilizer. So that's quite a big one as an organic farmer, where organic farming starts with the decomposition of mass. So there's no farmers market. That's a pretty big one. There's technical lock-in with the incineration, technical lock-ins with dairy production. Basically, you need to be big to participate. Jersey Water internalized the costs of farmland pollution. They had all the mechanics of cleaning the water that was made dirty by current farming practice. They'd invested in that. There was no organic packing line, pretty important. The information about dairy, and no organic abattoir. So these are people telling me what they are seeing as problems and barriers to what they want to do. The consumer, again, very hard accessing local markets. They had fear over the environment. They wanted to do better, but because of the packaging non-organic, no package line for organic, at the shop they always had to pick between price and what was wrapped in plastic. They couldn't access it, and they actually didn't know the difference between local and organic. So there was a misunderstanding there. Food processors. My favourite one was 240 restaurants and 1,000 food businesses, and the majority of them printed their menu once when they opened. So they didn't fit at all with the local producers. Environmental health policy teaches the importance of consistency in product, and that makes diversity really, really difficult, as well as policies around allergens in larger organisations, where they had to take food off the menu. They needed consistency when it came to allergens, and that's a lot around training. So there's you can start to see these sort of real experiences coming to the fore. Retail wholesale. My favourite one in here is local procurement policy focused on healthy food, not local food, and there were no other sustainability factors that are considered, and that's still the case. There's so much more to say about that when you start going in from so many different things, but I've just highlighted for you. Farmers, there might only be a few of them, but they all think really differently. If they're not part of the conventional farming and they're part of the agroecological farming, they are pretty individual people. So that's interesting. They'd never been in a room together, can you believe? For only 6 people. They'd never been to each other's farms. There you go. That's where they were at. Don't know what's. There's lots in there. Oh, a £40 million tractor debt within the current farming system. That's a lot of money to be held in debt. To then invite new people into farming, it's hard to say, yeah, let's do this. So yeah, these are a few things I found interesting. And policy. So another sort of political or policy lock-in that was no organic strategy that was going to be rewritten next year. So someone who asked about, have you do you have any relationship with the government? Because we proved that we are a market that's worth looking at, we're now involved in supporting the writing of the organic strategy. I think, oh, and there's tiny kind of the historic. So when you ask about policy, because you're looking at these barriers, you're looking at this history, you find out when people think the best year was ecologically in a policy level. When was the best year for them? They've got long memories. And the amount of people that said 1996 made me go and look at what was happening in 1996. And it was down to a few very, very key and clever politicians who believed that social and environmental factors were important. So yeah, it was that historic analysis was really key. So you kind of have all this information and you're trying to use it to your benefit. And I'm just going to draw a couple of insights that I drew from that. One of the earlier question is how do you kind of bring on the naysayers? When you have this complete picture and it's clearly evident that an agroecological farmer is marginalized by so many different factors, that power of the complete story, or a version, a more complete story, is hard to ignore. You become harder to ignore when you do this analysis, because you can finish their sentences for them, which can be annoying for some people in government. The other one is that there are lots of local campaigns and they can really benefit the wrong people, or the wrong system, not the wrong people, the wrong system. It can really benefit productionists, because when there's only local being discussed, the campaigns are potentially very destructive, because if it's local and then cost, then the worst or the most production style of farming really takes hold. Kasper highlighted in his research that fair trade, did it even exist here in the local food and the potatoes that we were eating? Were the standards being met locally? Yet they had the full identity, the power, the sort of energy of this concept of local. Yet most people might not even agree with what they're doing. So this was quite a big revelation, to hear it from people and to see it through the systems, that how you start to differentiate between local and saying my local is better than your local is quite a hard thing to challenge. How do you make decisions around building social capacity and environmental capacity that switches a local movement to a race to the top market instead of a race to the bottom market, which has been very evident in our agricultural system? And how do you define the practices whilst preventing divisiveness? And how do you, the other one was how legacy impacts today's decision. How do you get behind the trauma and the invisibility of a bad historic decision? That was something that was very, has been very emotional, meeting people who've suffered on the journey of progress that we've all been on. The structural side is a lot easier to understand, and it's all about, it was very clear that Jersey structurally supported imported linear markets. So it's just about what are the key components that we need. How much money can we invest in our own? How big do they need to be? What are the capacities of the farmers? What technical lock-ins do we need to wait for? And what grants can we get, and policies can we push, and conversations we have about targeting those structural changes? We've now got on an organic abattoir. There's a growing amount of education in restaurants about eating local and connecting with smaller farmers, and that stuff is and we're obviously involved in the writing of a new policy. So I hope that makes sense of kind of how much that research helped drive at least my understanding of the island. Any questions? I can't see anything, so if
I can pick up on any questions, India, and if anyone's got a question, they can just say question in the chat or something, and then or just shout it out. I guess it worked last time.
Or you could just put your video on and say hi.
Yeah, exactly.
Easy.
There's a question here coming from Jenny Anderson. Do you want to?
Go on, Jenny.
I just want to ask this question, but I suspect you're about to answer it in the next part, which was what was really interesting to me was from the absolute depth of the study and the systemic and human understanding that you gleaned, is how did you take those insights and translate that into the design of Scoop?
So we're actually not, some of them are kind of super practical, but we're not going to cover that in so much detail, because we've got these very specific things that obviously informed, all of it informed how I think about it. One of the greatest things to say to someone who's really struggled for the last kind of however many years, to say it's really not your fault. So very much about supporting players in the community who've really struggled, and it's really helped build collaboration and connectivity with these stakeholders who have found it difficult, especially around access and getting heard and getting the right information to people. So I think it's a very ongoing process. The original slide showed all the elements that have definitely changed. We started a farmers market, that was one, or an opportunity for market to happen. We are educating institutions of how to buy and work with the small variety of foods. So it sort of has informed a lot of my decision making. But the next section goes more about these key different kind of design ideas through the business. The biggest thing is it gave me the confidence to really know and understand a sort of quite a complex thing, but you can't stay still in that information either, because the barriers are sort of always shifting and culture shifting. So it's
another question. I think India covered a lot of things I would have said as well. Another question coming in from, I might say that wrong, Ilham Shenazine, is that right? I'm sorry, if you want to ask your question, you're welcome.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Ilham Skenazin. Well, it's okay. Well, I'm really sorry because I came late and I missed most of the presentation, but I will probably review it again. I just have a question about like the trees, like the fruit trees that we could actually cultivate in the city for people to be able to in time of crisis, to be able to reach that. What do you think about this approach?
Well, I think the kind of the planting of the trees is so phenomenally place-based. So there is projects here around a free food forest, but the importance of planting fruit trees within our community is we're so small, and fields back onto one another, and different farming practices are very, very close to one another. And to be deemed organic, you have to either lose half your field or you plant fantastic trees. So what farmers, the use of tree planting in Jersey is to really answer that particular need around sort of demarcating agroecological fields, and also providing income for the farmers. So I think the planting of trees anywhere is excellent. There's a terrible thing that I found out, that every single tree that's been planted in Jersey for commemorative reasons has died. So the act of planting a tree has to come from why you're planting a tree, and who's going to maintain that tree. So that's been my tree learning, if that helps.
I didn't realise that the tree that was planted for my granddad is dead.
I think that might be the only one that's still alive, maybe. No, it was,
maybe.
it was a brutal point to show the importance of understanding the capacity of a community to care for something which is going to go beyond them.
Yeah, it might be it's not, I don't have the facts to hand, but it might be, if you're interested in that in particular, I think in Germany there is a law or something written into something that is about times of crisis, that cities are kind of obliged, or they're asked to plant fruit trees in cities and pretty much everywhere. But anyway, it might be worth looking into to see what the situation is there. But I used to live there and I can't entirely remember, but I came across that once.
Thank you. I will look at it. Thanks.
A lot of we also have things with, for us, tree planting is also a way of helping runoff from fields and things like that. So, and there are people planting more nuts, especially from a sort of, less so for human consumption, but to encourage other wildlife, and fulfilling the same need of.
Originally, I remember this was pre-COVID discussion. What happens with those fruit trees, produce that isn't eaten? And it was an environmental health issue of who can sell and jam and then sell, and actually adding value to that household. It might only be £150 over the season or £30, but that can be quite important. Access that free food. So we did look around supporting, working with environmental health to kind of ensure a standard, which is again was something that was off the back of what's happening in Germany. So
they allowed us, didn't they? Through conversations with them, they allowed us to sell preserves.
Yeah, anyone's jams that were from. So yeah, fruit it can't all be eaten. So it's that storage and then that microeconomy of how they can support.
There's two more things, India, quickly. Maybe we can end with these two. Henrika wanted to just say something about the trees, and then after that, Francisco has a question which he can then pose in the group.
Yeah, thank you. It's Henrika from the Netherlands. So it's evening here. And yes, I know that in a big city in the Netherlands, they have, the government has planted all these trees or all the public space. They're trees, mostly apples, pears, apricots, well, just like fruits that are natural or that are easy to grow in this climate. And they're on a map and they're on an app. So then people tell when they're ripe, things like that. It's the city of Almere where this is happening. It's also called the Garden City, or the and I really enjoyed your presentation, India. And also what was really insightful for me was this difference between system and what was the other? Structural, right? Structural?
Yes, structural.
Exactly. And I think that you made an importance for kind of the trauma of people, and the suffering of people, that it's really important to, to not, because so often those people are victimized, or, in this consumer culture, it's all your fault, right? If you don't succeed. Yeah. So they have felt this already, that they should try harder, be smarter, etc. So then to tell them that it's systemic, it's, the cause of the suffering is not in their sphere of influence, but they are affected.
Yeah,
I think that, I'm really taking that along in my practice. Yeah, thank you.
Just to respond to that, I spoke with a guy who's probably been 18 years in Jersey as a sort of agricultural advisor. He lives in North England, and I asked him quite directly, was there ever a strategy to close down those small farms? And he said, absolutely not. No one ever said you've got to shut down. And that it's essentially, from a community divisive perspective, it's essentially nobody's fault. Yet there's a lot of anger in how it's come together, and going back to the sort of seeing the whole, or presenting a more full picture, has been really fascinating on both sides for that person who's essentially traumatized, and the kind of the relief in one respect for it wasn't intentional, and this is just a combination of all these different factors. Jersey's obviously a microcosm, and I don't know, going back and looking at Francesco and Laura's, we haven't gone through it in further, but how it works on a broader scale, it will just start to be an interesting.
India, just so we can just Francesco's question. Also, Ihan, I posted and Henrika, there's an app that is a German one for the same sort of thing, for finding fruit and nut trees, and I've just posted that in the chat if you want to look at that later. Francisco.
You're going to ask it in.
I can ask you the question. Would you like to say it, or shall I pose it?
Yeah. Hello. Thank you guys for the presentation. I have worked in the past also
we may be losing him. So what the question was in the chat was,
okay.
There you are. Go for it.
I'm here. Right. Yeah, I've had some experience working with small farmers and in a kind of a very kind of democratically governed organization, and it wasn't specifically a co-op, but very similar. And we encountered, I lost the count of how many times there were tensions between members wanting different things, and so I wonder if you've found a way that works for you to resolve tensions when you have different stakeholders. So, like farmers might want one thing, consumers want another one, managers want a different thing. And how do you resolve when you encounter this sort of different wants that often seem to be perceived as mutually exclusive or in conflict with one another?
So it's not, problems are forever present. I met a guy who, well, in my studies, a guy called Gilton who helped set up cooperatives around quinoa, and he said build in stresses, and I was like, it's already stressful. And what that does is sort of help you understand how the community works, but it felt quite hard and abusive, that, so it was just an interesting conversation. But actually what we did, or what it's not a farmers cooperative. No. And we were very sure to offer this diversity, so we'll go on and talk about the importance of diversity, and the fact that our principle is everything and everyone is different, and diversity is a key design feature. So we decided to co-opt the marketplace and co-opt the consumer, and it actively encourage farmers to go and get the best price they can, and we offered a fixed price, and offered them, encouraged difference, encouraged sort of plurality in that community, because as soon as when I hear the term there are 200,000 Indian farmers, I'm like, what? The idea that we think that they're all the same is absurd. Knowing the 6 farmers that I know of, well, it's more than that now, it's about 35 producers now, and different levels. they're all so different. So how do you think about difference in offering deals and making decisions, and what do you need to be fixed? So we offer a fixed price, not a fixed price, a fixed markup. So it's a little bit more.
Yeah, we offer the price that they ask for, as in,
yeah, that's it.
We don't offer price; they tell us.
We have
and we just accept it.
We have a standardized markup, but we haven't. So that, I feel there's problems in it, but that's you definitely don't want to design anything that's creates a rigidity over human beings.
I think, Francesca, though, in all honesty, it's quite, we can sell everything that they produce, so that's one conflict kind of gone, I guess, in the sense that there's not enough growers. You know, it'd be very different if there was lots of growers, I guess, and they're all trying to sell their stuff with us. Then then we'd have to look at finding more locations or broadening that market to accommodate them, and we are trying to do that as well. But to be honest, we're going sometimes too fast for the actual. It takes time for a new grower to discover what they want to do, and maybe 3 years down the line they may be producing something in some sort of scale that can have an impact on the local market or fresh produce market. So there hasn't, so rather than that, it's actually been quite a supportive environment for one another. And what we've done is just, for the first time ever, got them together every year, once or twice a year, so that they can sit down and discuss what they're going to be planting, so that not everyone maybe goes for the same thing, or to sort of say, look, this is what no one's growing and we're having to buy it in. And because we import from the UK if we can't get enough things here that will interest our customers. So it's, at the moment, it's still on that quite cooperative level, and everyone's kind of trying to help each other. We sometimes get kind of moments when we are looking to expand the kind of suppliers that can supply us, and we're looking at sort of how do we maintain trust in what we're doing with the consumers or with our customers. And so is trust enough? If someone comes to us and says, because not everyone, organic certification is beyond the means of some people financially, because they might just have a field of nut trees, and they're not spraying on it or anything, and they're doing it in a way that we would feel comfortable with. But then you sometimes do get moments of sort of small tension where those people who have spent their livelihoods getting certification and making sure that they fulfill all those criteria, or maybe questioning our approach on that front. But so far, and it's really been more of a cooperation than anything else on that front, I would say. But yeah, we just talked about one form of relationship there. There's obviously lots of others as well, but and I'm sure we'll come across these moments more as we grow, I imagine.
Yeah, we're yet to sort of design.
We better move on, I think, India.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, let's. Oh yeah. Oh no, we're good. So
okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, Francesca. Yeah, we can. If you've got any more questions, just send them through by email or something. We can always go into that discussion in a bit more detail.
So the final section is designing the economics of scoop. So it should answer some things. Each slide is a different concept. We'll spend as much as we can on each slide. So yeah, I hope it makes sense. So Kasper's going to introduce how it started, essentially, the initial economic structure.
So it's all nuts and bolts. So when we did this crowdfunding thing as part of the kind of preparators for that, we were looking at what we thought we'd need to sustain the business as well as the cooperative, obviously. And from a business perspective, we were looking, or we had to decide how we were going to obviously also run a shop and what's in it for whom and so on. And I based it basically, I'd been living in Germany for quite a while, and there was a shop in Stuttgart where we were, obviously cities are very different to semi-rural or suburban settings like Jersey, but that shop had a system whereby members paid subscriptions, and it depended how big their family was, or how big their household was, I should say. They paid sort of different levels, and it was a functioning, successful, over many years cooperative. So we took that pretty much as a basis for how we were going to do it, and we worked out that we would need a minimum of 150 members to be able to afford the location and overheads and stuff like that, because we decided to be staffed as opposed to purely voluntary. We wanted it to kind of be able to operate in that way. So that was based on everyone pays basically between £5 and £35 a month. £5 is for people who are on some kind of income support, or they have a certain need. We don't, we generally take that on trust value, and if someone says that's what they need, then that's what they can do. And then there's £15 to £35, depends on how big your household is. And with that, they get 25% off everything in the shop. So that's quite a big incentive to come to us regularly, and it helps us know how much we need to order, because we've kind of got a consistency in sales and things like that. So we were sort of looking at how much people spend on food in the UK or in Jersey per year, and guesstimating to an extent how much we thought we would have of that share, which we probably slightly overestimated. But in turn, we also underestimated the number of other people who would come, because we're not a members only shop. We're kind of open to anyone, but members also have these other, they have their discount, and they also have a place at the AGM and can obviously take part in the decision-making process and so on. So we with the crowdfunding, we asked people to be upfront for the first 1 or 2, 3 months. They'd get their month subscription. That gave us the capital to buy stock and set up. So we had about £18,000 worth of stock we could buy in, and then an additional, I think it was about £7,000 to actually build the shop, which relied on a lot of recycled materials and volunteers mucking in and so on. But that kind of got us started, and also created, I guess, an asset in terms of all of our stock, although a sort of perishable asset. And that was then ended up being sort of what we kind of expected, of about £300,000 sort of turnover, and it was enough to sort of just about sustain what we were doing, and provide a kind of solid foundation. These people were quite, the first people who joined were also quite passionate about it, I guess, and keen to continue that journey with us. So that's very nuts and bolts, but that's kind of how we, what the calculations that we made, and how we made sure that we weren't jumping into it, and it would be sort of over before we knew it. You can go to the next slide, I think, India.
Yeah, this on a systems basis, Kasper's the one that brought this concept, and I've sort of mull it over a lot, because we've got 700 items, and the idea of doing profit and loss accounts. The stock we buy in has a 50% markup, and we buy what we need for this. It's sort of, it made like work of understanding the economics of the business.
And I think it's important that we're transparent as well with our because we're a cooperative and all the kind of inner workings are transparent. It means that this marking up that in supermarkets is very, you have loss leaders and you have things that are very inflated and so on. This is sort of showing much more clearly what the producer's getting and what the value of things currently is, and all that side of things, which is important, I think.
I'm going to go on. So about resilience around people and energy and effort. The idea that volunteers have to create this movement. There is enough money in food, and food is, I sort of struggle with the idea of free food, and that's just an internal conflict, because it should be the most valuable thing the most valued thing. But I don't want to go down that sort of philosophical journey. But if I'm going back to this race to the top concept, free food is not going to provide that. And a volunteer is not going to drive this race to the top concept. So we had to think about it differently. We opted for a living wage. It's becoming, although we've just been affiliated with Living Wage nearly 3 years in, it feels like it's not going to, it's the foundation of what we pay people, but it looks like we're going to have to develop forward, constantly being reminded that cooperative business and sustainable business and socially responsible business can't stay still in its thinking. So we're currently addressing what looks beyond the living wage. groceries themselves have incredibly little profit. So how do we maintain that standard of money within a system is a really interesting process. We pay 75p as a minimum to the farmer, in the pound to the farmer. So we've got very, very small budgets. And everybody normally says, okay, let's opt for convenience and get to a wider market. But one thing people don't talk about often is how convenience itself is a huge economic asset, and it's either owned by the shop or it's owned by the consumer. And as soon as it's owned by the consumer, you've lost all that money in your business. So we always have got to consider how people are going to get paid and paid properly within a fundamentally low margin organization, and how that's going to move forward. And also each workforce will be highly dynamic and very, very different. So maybe catch up in a year's time to see how we're now going to be talking about it then. But it's just, as a basis, that's where we're at. I think that was clear.
Yeah.
So what's been really key to have this sort of standard as living wage and paying people properly, although we do depend on volunteers, is exploring revenue streams and optimizing on waste and upgrading stock management systems and all investing into the business when you can, either through grants or profit, in order to find more margin in the notoriously small margin industry to maintain space for people, and doing that before you give away any convenience, because you'll never get that back.
Just to quickly interject, just a comment on the side from, I'm not sure the name, but under Level O Design, talking about free food and teaching others how to grow their own food movements for the communities in need. Absolutely encouraging people to grow is, that's really important as well. So we've got a few things. We do seed sharing once a year, seed swaps, and we also have now free plant pots. So we're developing things like that as well. And we, in the same way that when we cook a product, we're trying to empower people to be able to cook that themselves. We're also always, encouraging people to grow their own produce as well, and increase biodiversity through doing that. So it's a
virtual dip in the summer when people are growing their own food.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Which we can
that's just a quick little interjection, but we can probably move on now.
Okay. So yeah, so paying people properly is a key driver. So yeah. Kasper's going to
go to the next slide, India.
Is that you? Can you
You're
not?
frozen.
Hello?
I think we may have lost Kasper.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Andrea, I can hear you, but I think we've lost Kasper.
Oh, have you lost Kasper? Okay, can I just, I'm just going to let him go. Let him in when he's back. Oh, is he back?
I'm back.
Okay. So,
yeah.
Can you see?
My family were listening to too loud music downstairs, so I had to switch it off. Are we on this next slide?
Yeah, can you see the Scoop Blue side? Yeah. Okay.
Shall I yeah, carry on. So this is just like you were saying, one of the ways that we are, one of our people come to us either because of their, sometimes a combination, either because of their concerns about eating, wanting to eat organic food and their own health and things like that, or because of reducing waste and being concerned about plastic pollution or unnecessary packaging. So we've got a very strong focus on that as well. And one of the things that we always wanted to do is, well, we've got something called the Scoop Loop, and we look at all the different waste streams that are in our business and also outside our business within the growing community, and try and put them to use. So one of the things we're doing, which you can see pictured, is we have a glass recycling centre. Well, it's not recycling, reuse centre. So people can drop them off. We will then sterilise them and use them in the kitchen. to package some of the things that we make in the kitchen. The things that we make in the kitchen are using up anything that might not survive over the weekend or whatever, or if a farmer has a glut of something, then they let us know. So they might have lots of tomatoes they won't be able to sell because it's a particularly good year, then we'll make passata with them and things like that. So we're looking at different ways of trying to reduce waste and improve people's livelihoods by doing that. There we go. And what was interesting for us in the sterilisation was that we found that it was price-wise no different to buying takeaway containers. Obviously a lot more labour intensive, but then we're giving that money to a member of staff who can earn a living off it rather than putting it into more packaging. We'd use a lot of techniques in the kitchen that are quite traditional techniques for preserving food. We're making a lot of ferments at the moment, which is proving very popular, and we're getting interested in that from a health perspective as well. So again, extending the life of some products that maybe would otherwise go to waste. And if it really doesn't make it into the kitchen, then it will go to our chickens soon. And at the moment it goes to the compost. So we're trying to reduce all of that. And there's sort of also with little things, we got a company who provides bulk detergents, and we worked with the local, because we're on an island, it's not so easy to have circular systems sometimes, but the local ferry companies send them back for free and they get refilled and so on. So we're trying to create as many circular systems as possible. And there's always things obviously that you can improve on, but that's where we are with that. I'm sorry, I'm a bit out of breath from running up and down the stairs. But anyway, if you want to add anything, feel free, and yes,
I can't. Oh, biodiversity. So Kasper mentioned earlier about Rewild My Plate. It was an arts morning boat project that I was involved in. We fundamentally believe that we need to create a more connected solution to biodiversity by considering that it at every part of our system. This is, I've been sort of toying whether to explain. No, I won't explain it. And here are two images from kind of the origins of Rewild My Plate, which was an exploration into kind of 2,000 shoreline ingredients and 400 land ingredients that are just in the surrounding landscape, and the 120 different growing ingredients that we came across in our cultivated spaces that we were reaching. We put a huge list on the wall and just got people to devise weird and wonderful recipes from them. That was just kind of understanding the sort of edible biodiversity of our landscape. But you immediately know that as soon as you try and get that into the consumer or through the system, that it's much easier just to kind of rewild over there and increase productivity of the ingredients that we know and love. So this was really trying to understand, can we systematically, or can we create a system that's impact is biodiversity at every kind of node or moment in that process? And kind of Kasper asked you a question at the beginning to reflect. I kind of asked you to go off and think about any possibility in each section of our food system that you think might drive a reduction in biodiversity, or might be a barrier to biodiversity flourishing through our croplands and into our system. I've listed a few here, and then I'll talk a bit about how we're trying to overcome them. Consumer expectation of consistency. That's quite a big one. This whole project is called Consistent Inconsistency, which is a play on this. Consistency is even in the seed, the color of an ingredient, the texture, the taste, the how to cook it. Can you find a recipe for it on Google? The kind of understanding of it. So the shop is very much about opening that discussion. We have 700 ingredients, but we repeat not many. So we'll have a seed. We have that sort of our seed sovereignty, diversity design is we won't have more of one thing than there is.
And can I
Yeah, you wanted to.
It is a, it's an educational thing that the offering in supermarkets on a fruit and veg level is extremely narrow. I mean, incredibly narrow. And most people who've come to us haven't seen a purple carrot. And from those from the Netherlands, they might know the story behind this, but things like that, where you're just sort of introducing people to more variety within things that, or tomatoes or whatever it is really exciting for us in the shop. But it's also a challenge as well. It's sort of it takes maybe a year sometimes before people accept a new thing that they haven't seen before in what for them is the normal offering that they've experienced in the past in the past. So that's an ongoing journey for us, and it's and keeping farmers, encouraging them to carry on with this diversity is also, sometimes there's like, oh, okay, that's not selling quickly, let's just scrap the purple potatoes and stick with the ones that we know they're going to buy. But given time, we've found that people are accepting it and are getting interested in it, and that's good.
Yeah, it's really it's an exciting thing as you kind of talk more about it with the consumer. Labeling and environmental health, I picked up on this before, but labeling, because we create products, is a huge driver of loss in biodiversity, because printing labels, writing labels is expensive, and you want a recipe and you've got to make a product, and if it's changing all the time, how are you going to address those issues? So we've kind of thought around labeling that works and that the environmental health has approved of. That means that you can write a label on a product that is cost effective, it's easy to clean, and it tells you all the ingredients you need to know, and those ingredients can change each time you make that sort of product. And we use this sort of coding system, and that's going to develop over time, and more digital platform. And it sort of leads on to this this idea that recipes themselves kind of drive this diversity, this lack of diversity, because you need a particular recipe to create a label to then, once it goes on a journey of success and you sell more of that product, it drives this kind of uniformity. So how do you make sure that the labeling system and environmental health are going to work with you as you want to sell your products into different locations? We've got new contracts coming in selling products into institutions. So a really strong relationship with the environmental health officer is really key as you're kind of tackling these issues. Number 4 is recipes themselves. If you go in and write salsa verde on Google, which basically means green sauce, you'll get 9 billion responses that says there's parsley in it. So the internet itself tells you that the color green is parsley, and that's about it. So how do you help people let go of recipes completely? And how do you shift them into wanting product or wanting recipes around habit, as opposed to this idea of what it says generically on a piece of paper? And that sort of playing around with that feeds into how we design products and how we talk about the confidence of just cooking with anything. And then the other one is brand diversity, creating a false sense of choice. We're very unbranded in our shop, and we take as much label off, much of the labels away as possible, and have just ingredients and sort of connecting people with an ingredient, because a brand itself, just creating a brand, a unique selling point doesn't have to mean that anything inside it's any different. So these are the elements that kind of, when it comes to biodiversity in all areas, that we kind of think about. Well, I really enjoy thinking about. There's a little video of the shop. Mal did this today. So just to kind of show that there is, in a very small area, kind of pretty cheaply done, those gastro tins are great because they also go in ovens, created the 700 products. Behavior change is really simple. It's really simple, it's really difficult. Behavior change is really interesting because after a while, people get technically locked into your business because they have all the containers, and your relationship becomes structural, and that's quite a cool development. So it's not, if a big supermarket comes in, to make a decision to go shop there, you've got to get rid of all of this technical lock-in that you've created in your home. So the unpackaged nature I find really fascinating. The sense is starting to develop regarding smells. Children opening jars and going, that smells amazing, and it's a jar of prunes. That's kind of one of my favorite moments. It removes, an unpackaged store removes the best before dates, which straight away is a reduction in waste. An economic one, which I think is quite interesting, is single portions are valued at the same as multiple portions. So it doesn't discriminate against small families. It alters access points for people who are buying themselves individually, but it also maintains the value of a natural product the more it sells. So it doesn't follow the economies of scale in a slightly different way. And that really potentially shifts the access point of an unpackaged shop. Vegetables fluctuate, everything fluctuates, but there are some products that are much, much cheaper than in our competitors. Overall, we're probably more expensive. And that's interesting as the community shifts away from this very tight value-based community and gets more and more accessible. It'll be interesting to see, let's say if we make money, if in a couple of years' time, do we make the prices cheaper? Like, how do we think about this going forward? And we've reduced by half the single use. This is a pretty odd statistic, India. So about 450 households shop with us really regularly per week, and we reduce their food waste and their single use waste. And I estimated by
that was based on some feedback, I think, that they said that we'd reduced it by half.
So that's the package-free nature of, and how that impacts and how it helps make decisions. And this is Kasper's section.
I didn't get around to writing any notes on it. I guess that's like, so people come to us obviously partly because they trust in what they believe in what we're offering, but also because it's very fun to come to us. And there is a lot of direct engagement with the people who work there, who are also very interested in what they're doing. So that experience level, that going shopping is people go to us because they've got nothing else to do sometimes, and they just want to hang out, or they want to while away the time. It's not quick shopping with us, so you've got to get chatty, I guess. But so we're an experience as well, and I think you need to ensure that you crack that and get the right atmosphere in the space. And beyond that, we also do a lot of things that are trying to build a community. Obviously, in the last couple of years, it's been hard, and a lot of things have been put on ice and pause, but we have a sort of 3 clubs in waiting, one of which has sort of existed a bit beforehand. We've got a fermentation club where there's about 60 people waiting to go on that, and a similar number wanting to get going on a bread baking club. And then we've got a herb circle is going to be starting, and we've planted some herbs outside so they can start using them. And so there's various kind of knowledge sharing groups, which we feel are really important. Potentially in the end shed, we might be able to do repair cafes eventually. All these other sort of things that kind of build that community in a positive way, and also obviously help give us a bit of stability and resilience, because there'll be more and more involved in what we're doing, and that's, I think, our next step is to get more involvement between those who are kind of running it and the wider community. We run a lot of school workshops. At the moment, we're building a pizza oven with one of them, and learning about all the ingredients that go into a pizza. And we've got more things like that planned. There's other things. We do placements with people with special needs, and et cetera, et cetera. There's so many things, I think, that are part of that sort of broader picture of it not just being a shop, but being a community that and everyone within that community has a lot to offer. So that's that part of thing, which I think without that, I don't think we'd have as good a chance of having the presence that we have on the island, the recognition that we have, the media coverage that we have, and also probably the financial stability that we have.
We're not doing too bad for time. We've probably got 5 minutes for questions.
I didn't say men's shed. Oh. The end shed, not the men's shed. Yeah, it certainly is for everyone. Yeah. Was that a misunderstanding, or? No. Anyway, no, the end shed is a space that at the moment we aren't using in the building, and we're looking at it being a multifunctional space for workshops, other activities, and the bakery that we've been incubating a bakery by offering very, very cheap rent and a space in our kitchen for half the day, and they might move out into the shed as well if we get permission for that to happen. And then they can sort of scale up a little bit because he's doing really well now, and then we can start having other people coming into the kitchen and starting up their own initiatives. So we see this role as an incubator and just providing a space for people to get started as something that we can do in the future. Any questions? I'll try and pick them up.
I can stop sharing my slide now.
You can.
And then I can come in.
You see people properly.
Yeah.
But if anyone does want to get in touch with us and have a further conversation, more specifically about anything that they're doing or we're doing, then feel free to get in touch. I've posted a couple of times, but I'll just do it now again, which is our email, which you can have. Oops, not like that. Ignore that one. That's our email. So yeah, feel free to continue this discussion. Anything else?
Yeah, so we got involved with World Localisation Day Local Futures because of Taylor Smythe, who is part of Good Market Global, who's a wizard at connecting people on a global platform during COVID. So I thank her for that very much. Part of it is we've got a feast starting with the local with World Localisation Day, which starts tomorrow, which we've called Social Feed, and we've been supported by different institutions within the community. So yeah, so we'll have a bit of an ongoing thing with World Localisation Day. But so yeah, thank you, Taylor, for introducing us, and I hope we've been informative, or our experiences have given you, a reason to stay around for these 2 hours on a Friday night.
Yeah. Goodbye, everyone.